All right, Wade, tell us about Pigtails and Crew Cuts. I want to hear the origin of this. I know you kind of stumbled on this baby.
I did. I had been in the franchise business for a while before and uh, met a lady who started Pigtails and Crew Cuts in Atlanta. And this was in 2007 and 2006, four, sorry. This was in 2004. And she approached me and said, I understand you've been in the franchise business. I've created Pigtails and Crew Cuts and would like to franchise it. Would you mind helping me? And I told her that I'd be glad to, and I had a couple meetings with her. And I ended up buying it from her as a startup concept that had one location here in Atlanta because I felt like there was an opportunity to build it into a franchise business. And her deal wasn't really to go all the way with it and take it to the full extent. And so that's how I got into it. And I'd taken my children there and just thought it was a great place. It's a fun, friendly, children's centric haircut salon for children. And I just thought it was a great idea. And we decided to work together to franchise it, my partners and I.
Nice. All right, Wade. Well, let's share with the audience a little bit about your background. You are a legend in franchising. You've been in the industry for 40 years, right?
I have.
All right. Share with the audience your journey. What are
Well,
you
I
best known
started
for?
as soon as I got out of college, I went to work in the first Heavenly Ham store, which was a specialty meat store. We sold spiral sliced hams and other specialty meats. And that turned into something. And we ended up buying that concept from the original owners and built it into a franchise system that we eventually sold after almost 20 years to our main competitor, Honey Baked Ham. And we had about 250 locations when we sold it. We're all across the country. And, I kind of took what I learned there and built Pigtails and Crew Cuts from that, kind of with the same model of, we were selling a specialty product and this, we're selling a specialty service. And we kind of applied the same systems and the same ideas, although they've evolved pretty significantly in 20 years. But yeah, that's kind of my interesting background.
When did you end your time with Heavenly Ham?
We sold it in 2002 and I left fairly shortly thereafter. It was just a little bit of a big company mentality for me, and I was more looking for another startup
Mhm.
and wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. My wife is a real estate attorney, and she was slammed with a refinance boom that was going on. And so I kind of became Mr. Mom to my three. I had two twin girls that were two and a son that was three. And so we hung out together for a little while. And then I kind of figured out it was time to get back to work, and Pigtails and Crew Cuts came on the scene, and it just worked out that I was able to get back to work and get after it again.
I know most people are excited to talk with you about, of course, launching Pigtails and Crew Cuts and growing it out. But I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the time period that truthfully is near and dear to my heart. And it's actually those 2 years of that time period from Heavenly Ham to Pigtails and Crew Cuts. I went through a similar experience myself after selling my company, and it's not easy. And I think since we have so many emerging founders that are watching the podcast and listening and folks in the industry, would you share what that's like? You leave, you think you're riding off into the sunset, and how long was it after you left that you had a aha moment like, this is not all what it's cracked up to be. Life is more than just, being home, and I want to do something fulfilling again.
It was probably about 3 days of changing diapers on three children. Now, I really enjoyed that time. It was something that a lot of people don't have the opportunity to do. And I really enjoyed it, but I never felt like I was finished. And I got a lot of phone calls from people who were looking for somebody with franchise experience. And there are a lot of franchise companies based here in Atlanta. And I talked to a lot of my old franchisees about their business opportunities. I talked to a lot of people who had other franchise companies. And I really kind of always thought I would get back into something. I love the franchise model so much that I felt like, I really didn't know how to do anything else. So I kind of
Mhm.
always thought it was going to be back in the franchise business. I didn't really know where, but then this one came along. But there were others. There were other people that I talked to about other opportunities and some very interesting ones. And I ended up with this one just because I felt like it was very similar to the first one. And I just felt like there was great opportunity. But I think everybody has to take their own path. I think it was, I always thought I was going to get back into, I wasn't finished. I was in my early 40s. So there wasn't a place for me it wasn't time to retire. That wasn't on the radar. This was more of a, step back, do something I wanted to do, and then go from there, and then figure out another path. And I didn't have any idea that it would be children's haircuts. I mean, that was as far from my radar as anything could get.
Right.
A funny story, I called my two partners and I said, and they were my partners in the ham business. I said, hey boys, you guys want to get in the kids' haircut business? And they said, no. And I said, yeah, I got it, but we ought to look at this. It's kind of a cool concept. And we did a little due diligence, and all of a sudden we were kind of like, yeah, that might be kind of fun too. They're not involved in the business day to day. They're still involved in other franchise businesses, but I still talk to them. We still share ideas, and it's great. But yeah, it was an interesting path.
Yeah. Yeah. You just never know where you can end up. By the way, I want to go full circle and tell you that I absolutely admire what you did. And for me, looking back on my time period too, when I was in between, I am so grateful for the time. Now, my kids were older at the time when I left my company, but I am super grateful for the opportunity that I otherwise wouldn't have had, to be around my kids and, my wife having more time with me and stuff. And it's just, it's something that we don't always get a chance to do. I think for all of us, depending on, of course, the age, on whether we're looking to retire, or even if we think retirement is something in our future, some of us quickly find out it's not all that it's cracked up to be.
Yeah, my children don't remember it, but the relationship that we have really was centered around that time. They were too young to have that memory, but I'll never forget it. And you're right, it is a treat.
Yeah, you're very, very fortunate that happened. Okay, so there was something about this brand, though, because you'd been in franchising a long time. Of course, you'd never been in the haircut business, and you saw other opportunities. So what made this thing truly special that you were willing to change your life and you're going into this?
Well, my son and I had gone to my barbershop, and you can tell I'm not my customer. We would go to my barbershop, and it was a miserable experience for him. He would scream the whole time. I call it the Samson complex. He was getting his strength sapped by having his hair cut, and it was tough. And the lady had started Pigtails and Crewcuts, and I took him there, and we sat there on a Saturday morning for an hour because they were so busy. They had just opened, and they were so busy, and never once did he say, Dad, we got to get out of here. We got to leave. He never said, I don't like this. And he sat through the experience and was like, when can we go back? And the concept of Pigtails and Crewcuts is for those people. It is a comfortable, fun, engaging environment where you're getting the best service possible for something that you can do in your bathroom. But I've always found parents are willing to do the best for their children. And that was why I thought this made sense. The ham business, we had the best product, and it was all about family environment. We sold them for the holidays. It made people's holidays. And this is kind of the same thing. It makes people happy when they come to Pigtails and Crewcuts. It's a fairly mundane experience getting a haircut. But, if your children don't enjoy it, or if they're just learning to get haircuts, or you want your children to look the best they can be and enjoy the experience, it made total sense to me. And that's really kind of why it resonates.
Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fiume, or Emerging Franchise Group, LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.